bowl or bowls. But I was also wondering, out in nature, can you use a river that's flowing rapidly,
Yeah,
or a brook,
good
or
point. Yeah, you could use a river or a waterfall. Part of the thing with the sound is also the movement of your body. You're part of what you're doing is you're re-educating the somatic part of your nervous system to have more of a physicalizing effect on the spiritual energy coming in rather than pushing back on it. So there's that component, but like the sounds of an ocean or being by a river, especially water or wind, like especially water, like in some of my early days of shamanic practices, the teacher, I don't know what to call the person, but the teacher would we would be like next to like a small like little like creek or river, and not only did we do a thing with the sound, but you had like watch the river, like focus on a spot and just keep watching the movement. And it's that same idea of you're re-educating something to do with the nervous system and how you're processing information. And so at one point they even had us build like a little like kind of square like box, but it was empty, like you could see through it, and then you held it in the water and then you watched the water go over it just in that box, like you just kept watching in that box, and it does something to the mind. And so wind can do the same thing. Wind can, the water in a way was very purifying to the mind. Wind can be the same way. Like standing in the wind, letting it blow over you and kind of watching it, or watch it, how it hits your body. I would say the wind is more impactful when you're like on top of like a mountaintop and you can see what the wind is doing to like the grass and the trees and things like that. But still the same idea.
I was also thinking creatures, animals, and one of my very favorite thing in the spring is to hear the first peepers that come out. And I mean, to use sounds like that transports me to other places. And I wondered if we could use it in this way too.
But I call that like a meditation on awareness. And again, very, very shamanic. Like, we used to have to go out and like do some sort of task. And when we'd come back, we'd be asked like, different questions. And a lot of times it was, what did we observe? And it wasn't about the task itself, but everything that we paid attention to on the way there and on the way back to do the task. And it was about being aware of the sounds and the smells and the movements and all those things. And so it is like being like present and aware of nature, the flow of nature and everything. And it's it could be a practice unto itself. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. They used to blindfold us, like they take us out in the middle of like dense woods, and then they would blindfold us and we would have to find our way out.
Wow.
And it's like what you're saying, like you're having to be aware of like the denseness of air and the sounds and the smells and like all those things. And like at first it sounds like, God, I'm going to get all scratched up. And after you kind of like tune in, it's actually, there's like an order or a sense that you get like doing it, and you kind of get into the flow of it, and it's not as hard as you would think, but your mind makes it like this, like like I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get out. And you process things through the senses very differently than the way we think we do.
Right.
And so, doing what you're talking about is like a version of that. It's just having awareness or a oneness with nature.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, enjoy those birds.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Hi. I
Mhm.
just wanted to say, yes, there's definitely a pushback. My
Yeah.
whew, but
Tuberose is very strong. It's a very strong oil for spiritual practices and things.
so
And so-
I'm putting betaverone, and it seems to be helping a lot because I really felt
Okay.
it like in the nuclear ligament. So with what you were just saying, I like to stare into a fire. Is that the same? Is it doing the same thing?
Yeah, it's doing something very similar. That's actually one of the ways of doing purification with fire is to be practice a form of awareness while looking at a fire, and it does something to the mind, and you could say it's very, very purifying, like on a lot of levels. In my early days, a lot of times when I was receiving teachings, that's how it was given, is we'd have to look at a fire for a period of time, and then over a period of time the teachings were given actually through transmission, and then you had to voice some aspect of the teachings.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just some more clarifying questions about the sound. Is
Mhm.
that why the Tibetan prayer wheel makes that rattling sound? And is it the motion through the wrist and a full arm movement?
It's the motion, for one, you're moving your hand, like in a clockwise motion to do it, but it's that you're engaging the motor nerves to make it happen. So it's not so much about that it's the wrist or the elbow or the arm, it's just that you're engaging motor nerves to do it. And for the prayer wheel, it's not so much about the sound as it is just about the movement itself, Yeah.
And
Very,
then,
very powerful technique, the prayer wheel. I think there's also a Jewish version of the prayer wheel, but prayer wheels are uh, very potent in what they do.
can this be done with a drum?
Yes, yeah, drum can totally be done that way. Yeah. There's actually a whole spiritual practices that are based on drumming.
And they were saying the arm motion, they were referring actually to the singing bowl then.
Yeah, you're still doing the same thing with the singing bowl. You're still moving your hand in a clockwise motion, and the drum, it's not so much about the circle, but it is still you're using both hands, and it's doing something to the brain and how each hemisphere is communicating with the brain. And then it is about re-educating, especially when it's a ceremony or certain chants or mantras or whatever you want to call them are being said, songs are being sung that bring in a certain kind of energy while you're doing that motion. Yeah.
And then back to the oneness practice itself,
Mhm.
is there an issue with using this with multiple oils within a short period of time?
No, it's not been my experience. Especially when you're trying to process and have a deeper connection to the plants that you are wanting to work with, like a lot of times when people are like a shamanic healer or even a medical aromatherapist, they kind of have these like go-to plants that they use, right? And so that's usually the plant that they've like really had a deep connection with. And it starts to do a lot of different things because they understand it beyond the idea of just treating symptoms. And so it's almost like you you start to get the personality of the plant. And so, it's going to be something that it's not just a one-time thing. You're going to do it over a period of time. You're going to interact with the plant. And so, you open up the pathway to this, and it will deepen the practice. And so, if your body can handle doing more than just one in a short period of time, then I'd say go for it. Yeah. Yeah. So, no other questions? We're all good.
Any other questions do you want?
Yeah,
people
like
to-
any kind of questions can go. I'm gonna still do an advanced strategy that's not in your booklet. But if you have other questions, I mean, this weekend's more for you guys and what you want to talk about and things that you want to address rather